Well, welcome. I'm John Martin, Airport Director and Chairman of the IPI International Partnering Institute. We're very pleased to be able to host the event at the airport here today. By way of background, this is the airport's museum, aviation museum. We show exhibits on commercial aviation throughout the year. The space is open to the public on most days unless we have a special event like we're doing today. This space is a virtual replica of our original terminal building from 1932. So you can see we've grown quite a bit when you walk out into the international terminal here from this small space. So again, welcome to the IPI Forum and Awards Lunch. We're pleased to have everyone here today. We think quite a few more folks will be joining us prior to lunchtime, so they can be present for the awards ceremony as well. The IPI is very important to me because of the importance of partnering. I've been director of San Francisco International since 1995. On all of our major projects, we have used the partnering approach very successfully, and the partnering approach is really now integrated into our day-to-day operation of the airport. So I'm a very strong proponent of the models developed by Dyer, especially, who's led all of the partnering at the SFO over my time as airport director. So if you're not yet a member of the IPI International Partnering Institute, we hope you'll consider joining and promoting our mission to change the culture of the construction industry. So it's now my pleasure to turn over to the mic to Sue Dyer, the founder of the IPI, my good friend, and as I said, the person who's led our partnering successfully at SFO for the last 15 years. Sue?
Well, thanks everybody so much for making your way here today. And I think just like in life, the early bird gets the worm. And those of you who got up early and got here have some real treat in front of you with some of the panels and things you're going to hear this morning. Just a little logistics, there is a restroom in the back, so if anybody needs that, it's there for you. We are 2 years old as a nonprofit as of April, and so the International Partnering Institute is working along to grow and to gain in membership and spread the word that we need to change the culture. And today I'm going to present the model based on the think tanks that we had last year. But before that, I thought I would share with you that IPI is growing, and we are starting chapters now, and different countries may become a chapter of the International Partnering Institute, and we're also opening up regional offices. So we're working on a regional office in the Northeast, and we are opening a chapter in the Australia. So we have a little message from Australia IPI.
Well, hi everybody, I'm Graham Scott and I'm speaking to you today from IPI Australia. Well, I guess almost, because having an IPI in Australia is the direction we're heading in and pretty much what I'm talking about today. But before we go into that, I'd just like to give you a bit of a heads up as to who I am and I guess where I come from. I'm an ex-construction manager and have a master's degree in organisational psychology. I lecture at a university in Brisbane here in Queensland and run my own small consultancy business. I'm actually a practising psychologist. I've been specialising in setting up and managing relationships and project teams for some years now. And while doing some research for some papers I'm writing, came across the IPI. I was actually truly amazed at the synchronisation in thinking that I had with the IPI approach, and so much so that I actually contacted Sue and pretty much said we've got to get the IPI happening here in Australia. And Sue and I have had a number of email conversations and decided that I would set up as the Australian CEO of IPI. And this to me carries a lot of responsibility. I think it's going to be a fair bit of hard work, and when we get it all done, it would be an honour to see it happen. So from that, I'd just like to give you an idea of where we are now and what we've done. So work to date's really been for me to plant the seed within my own network, and this has been met with pretty much positive response, although the difficulty here is that there are a couple of strong beliefs to overcome, excuse me, those are something like we've tried partnering, it didn't work, we do it anyway, and both of these are a fair way from reality. And the looking back, I suppose, to the initial introduction to Partnering Australia, that was a visit by Charles Cowan in the early 90s, but since then it's been fairly much watered down. And in speaking to Sue, I think we've experienced some of the same difficulties and frustrations, such as the belief that all a project needs is a workshop up front and all's going to be well. And changing that thinking in a lot of places is like getting your best friend in to have root canal surgery. People just don't want to do it. They don't probably see the advantage of doing it. And my hope is that when we move to a place where relationships are treated with the same reverence in projects as safety. So that's pretty much an idea of my thinking and should give you some idea of where I'm at. So hopefully in the very near future I can actually be present, not on a video, but actually come to one of your forums. I'd really enjoy that, so I'm looking forward to being able to do that somewhere in the near future.
So we are in the process of working to develop our first chapter in Australia, and so more to come. There is already a group of owners over there who are quite excited with some of the research and efforts that are underway here, and I want to be able to share all collaborative models along with all of our partnering models with everyone. We also know we need a greater presence in the Northeast, so we're working on opening an office there. So more to come on that. But at the first, we need to make sure that we're talking to everyone about what we're trying to achieve, and that we need to change the culture of how we work together. And I thought I would share with you today the working model that we have developed. Now, just a little background for those of you who weren't here. Last year we had a forum, and at the end of each of our forums we hold a think tank. And the think tank, we break into owners, design phase, and construction phase. And last year we talked about what do we need to do, and we came out of that with 12 recommendations. Now we take those 12 recommendations extremely seriously, and so from that, one of the recommendations was that we need to come up with a working model for what we're talking about when we mean partnering, and how we go about achieving it, how we go about implementing it. So we've developed that model. One of the other recommendations was that we adopt the Caltrans Partnering Program model as the IPI model. So today I'm here to present that to you, and in your packets is a paper that outlines that model for you. And the other thing that came out of that same think tank was a recommendation that we need to have common language and common definitions about what partnering is. So we're beginning to work on developing that as well. So I thought I would start off by sharing a story from last week. I did a partnering session with a team. And it was just a normal kickoff of a project at the construction phase. This was construction phase. And I went in and I talked to everyone, and everything was okay. Everything's going along all right. And I thought, well, I'm going to start this session with really having them dive into understanding what they want, what their interests are. So I split the groups, and I had the owner's team go to one flip chart, and I had the contractors team go to another flip chart. And the assumption was the designer was part of the owner's team at this point. And I had them put on their flip chart, okay, what do you need? What are your interests? What do you need in order for this project to be successful? And I had them list all of those things. And I gave them about 10 or 15 minutes, and they had, some of them had a couple pages. One group had a couple pages of things they needed. And then they reported back what it was that they had on their list. And then after that, they reported back. Then I said, okay, what are your interests in common? Your common interests. And as they reported back and listened to each other, what each other's interest was, they said, well, all of our interests. They're all of our interests are. Look at that. You want safety, we want safety. You want it on time, we want it on time. You want to have quality, we want to have quality. Look at that. They're all the same. There were no divergent interests on their list. And they're all astounded. They can't believe this could be true. How could that be the case? Because we have a model in construction where we think we have to protect our interests from each other. And yet the nature of the relationships in construction is that our interests are totally overlapping, which makes us interdependent. And when you're interdependent, that's a really special kind of relationship. When you're interdependent, you have to work together. Anytime you're working against each other or pulling from each other, you're actually diminishing the ability of the project to be successful. And this is true whether it's in planning, design, or construction phase. And at the end of the day, they all said, we just could not believe it. They all walked in that room thinking, well, you know, we're getting along okay, but they didn't understand the nature of their relationships. And that is why I believe we really do need a new model that recognizes the nature of the relationships that we do have in construction. And we need a new model. So this is the IPI working model for partnering, and we will walk you through this. I also wanted to just go quickly, and we also have developed a definition of what partnering is so that we could have a shared definition of what it is. And so we're defining partnering as a collaborative process that works to develop a culture of partnership between the organizations and teams that must work together to achieve the successful delivery of construction projects. And that would include anything that we add to the process, like collaborative tools. There can be lots of nuances and differences to it. But that's our definition, our working definition. So the model. So we modeled it after the Caltrans partnering program. And this model has 4 phases to it. And I'm going to real quickly walk you through the 4 phases. And certainly there's more in the paper, and there will be more to come. I know we're probably going to need to write a guide for people, for owners to implement this. Just backing up a little bit, the other thing that has always come out of our think tanks whenever we've done them is that we know that culture change must be driven by the owners. They're the ones who have the ability to put the requirements into their specifications and documents. They're the ones who have the ability to change policies on how we work. They're the ones who have the ability to write whatever we need to do to assure collaboration. So the driving force has to be the owner. So this model is really written, it's very owner-centric, so it's really written for the owners. Okay, so phase 1. Phase 1 is that blue part there. And the starting of the first phase is for a facility owner to actually have partnering objectives. Well, what do you need to achieve? I see so many, most partnering programs that I see or partnering processes are just a process that's sort of implemented somewhere. Oh, I think we need to do partnering, as opposed to a part of a process where we actually have an objective for the organization on what we need to achieve. And that could be, well, it seems like we're having too many claims, or it seems like, we really need to beef up our productivity, or we really are not attracting people. Whatever it is, there needs to be objectives at the organizational level as to why are we implementing, or do we need to implement a partnering program? Or we just need to get better, and we need to get better in these areas. It needs to be very specific. You need to know what you're trying to achieve. After you've developed that, then you begin to do an organizational assessment. And you need to measure where you are. You make an assumption of what you need in what your objectives are, but now you need to measure, where are we really? Do people really understand what we're doing, why we're doing it? Do they agree with our assumptions on what the objectives are? And this can be the form of surveys or some kind of way of measuring. I've seen surveys, I've seen focus groups, whatever you need to do. We need to find out where are we at now, and are we ready for this implementation of a new process. Then after you've done that, then we highly recommend that you develop a joint partnering steering committee. And this is a stakeholder group, so it would include the owners, folks that are involved in the facility, as well as industry folks. That would be designers, perhaps of CMs, and the contractors who would be doing your work. And they're all part of your steering committee to help you implement this. It can't be only the owner at the table. It's got to be everyone, all the partners there, helping now to design what the partnering program is going to look like, and ultimately helping to implement it. And in phase one, this steering committee will identify what they think are the lessons learned. They will clarify the objectives of what they're trying to achieve. We like to focus on 1 year, like for the next year, what do we want to achieve? And perhaps there's long-term things also that we're working on, that this is going to be the little part we're going to work on this year. And we write a charter. The charter is really important because the charter defines how this group is going to work, who's a member of it, how they make decisions, what authority they have, what resources they have available, and how the whole thing's going to work. And we ask everyone to commit. This committee is one that you may not send a substitute. These are the CEOs and the very high-level people, policy-making people from all of your stakeholders. And they meet, usually when it starts, they meet about monthly, and then as time goes on, it'll shift to quarterly, and then they may shift probably never longer than quarterly. And lesson learned is that you can never have them go away for very long, because new things will happen, things will change, you'll want to have new tools, things will happen in the economy, new regulations will occur, there'll be things that you'll have to be adjusting along the way. So they write a charter, and from the charter, let me go down here. So phase two, this group identifies what are the critical success factors. So based on your objectives and what they think is going on, what your own organization thinks going on, you identify the critical success factors. So what do you need to do? What do you need to do? And you take those critical success factors and you identify from there, you create your program element. So that could be a new specification, it could be an implementation of a new, we're going to use design build, we're going to use some other collaborative tool. What are the elements of your program? What are you going to do? And what are you going to do at the design phase? What are you going to do at the construction phase? And we really believe it can be tailored to any type of delivery system, and should be. So that you're deciding what you can do and what you want to do. So you're implementing all of that. What are your elements? What are you going to do? Then from there, you know what we're going to have these 11 elements, or what we're going to have. From there, now you have to have a structure in order to implement these into your own organization, and your stakeholders need to do that in their organization as well. But the owner has to drive it. So you're going to need some kind of structure. So that means that, already we've got the steering committee, and the steering committee has subcommittees working on each of these elements. And now you're going to need, probably just like we have in safety, you're going to need someone to run the partnering program, or at least have that be part of what they do, and someone who's overseeing it and making sure it happens, making sure that we have all of the things that we need in order for it to get embedded into your organization. And that includes the next level, which is guidance. You're going to have to you're writing new policies, you're writing new practices, you're writing new procedures. You're going to have to write guidance on how your people are going to implement this. What are they going to do? How are they going to do it? Okay, so the steering committee, this is from the Caltrans Partnering Program. At the end of 1 year, they had developed all of the critical success factors, and they had created the elements. And then we had subcommittees, and the subcommittees wrote partnering improvement proposals. And these partnering improvement proposals then got vetted at the steering committee meetings with everyone. And sometimes that could take a while. We're going to change a spec on how we deal with CPM schedules. That could take a while talking about until we come to agreement. Then once we come to agreement, it gets signed by the chairman or the sponsor. And now it is an official recommendation from this group. So we ended up with 23 the first year, 23 recommendations that were signed by this group. And then the next year we have about 11 this year. And so you have we call this the Bible. In here now we have an implementation plan too of when we think we're going to begin to implement all of these things that we've developed. And it includes spec changes and who owns that and who needs to work on it. Who are the people in the organization that need to make these things happen? And then the whole group holds them accountable. On the partnering guidance, well, we knew we were going to develop an entire program, so we wrote an entire program guidance. So the partnering manual is all of the elements of the program in one place, written for the field level people on how do you implement all the elements of the program. And we knew also we needed the partnering facilitators to really help, because without them to help implement this, you could never have a very rigorous program. So we wrote a partnering facilitator standards and expectations and really brought them in to help the program to be implemented. And we wrote other things too, but these are just some examples of guidance that needed to be developed. There's also guidance and manuals that already exist that have to be developed. Then in phase 3, well, you've done a whole heck of a lot of work. You've identified your objectives, you've identified what your critical success factors are, you've got your subcommittees working on them, they've developed partnering improvement proposals, they've gotten them approved and recommended, and now you've put them all into this program, in this structure, and you've got guidance on it, but nobody knows about it. Now you got to train people. So you're going to have to train people on what it is that you have developed and how they're going to implement it. So I know in the Caltrans program, we decided that it was best to have people that are actually field people doing the training. And Caltrans is large. We had about 4,000 people that we needed to train. So we developed a trainers for trainers, and we trained 60 field people, one from the owner side and one from the construction side, who side by side did the training together. And we developed a T for T, a training for trainers, and they delivered the training. These 60 trainers delivered 122 classes in the first year, and now it's ongoing. And so you have to have the training in order for people to really know what it is they're supposed to do. And even internally, you need to have training for any other things that you develop. Like we developed an integrated dispute resolution system. Well, there had to be training on how, or guidance developed for how's that going to be implemented, because it had affected a lot of different departments and different divisions. So you have to develop the guidance on now, we're changing things, this is what we need to do. And let me just back up 1 second. We're talking about changing culture. So you're probably sitting there thinking, man, that seems like a lot of work. To change a culture takes a conceited, long-term effort. And it's about changing policies, because your values are embedded in your policies and they show up in your practices. So when you're talking about changing culture, we have to get to the point where we're changing policies and practices, or you're never going to change culture. And so anytime you have a policy or a practice that is incongruent with your partnering program or your partnering practice, people are going to go, well, I don't know what to do. It says I'm supposed to be a policeman here, but they're telling me to partner. How do I do that? You got to have policies that are congruent with what you're trying to achieve, that recognizes the nature of the relationships. Okay, so we're in phase 3 now. We've done the training, and now we must measure where we're at. So we have One of the things that we implemented in the Caltrans program is that there's measurements required on every project. So it's an accountability tool as well as a tool to see how are we doing at implementing the program. There's also program level measures so that you can see with targets, are we making progress with our objectives, the original organizational objectives that we set out? Are we meeting those? Are we working towards those? And so you have measures. Now those measures give you lessons learned. And so you take those lessons learned, and we do it annually. You take those lessons learned, and now you can change or adapt or create new things to take your product to the next level. Last year, remember, I talked about how productivity was such a problem in the industry, and you know, I really do believe it's because we have a model that does not recognize the nature of the relationships of the people who have to work together. And so this is going to be an incremental thing. It's not going to go, you're not going to go from 1 to 10 in a year. You're going to go from 1 to 1.5 to 2 to 2.5. And those are going to be based on lessons learned. It's like stretching a muscle. It doesn't happen all at once. So you're going to take the lessons learned and you're going to adapt and come up with, well, what do we need to do now? For example, there seems to be a natural progression. The first thing you do is you're going to focus on project level. What do we need to do to make our projects more effective? What do we need to do to make sure that we don't have a lot of claims, that we actually work together, that we can finish on time? That's the first thing we saw